Welcome everyone. So we're going to be having a panel conversation today on neurodiversity in the workplace. As you know, neurodiversity can hold a number of misconceptions, some of which we place on ourselves, some of which are kind of literally placed on us. Hopefully by the end of this session, we'll be able to kind of dispel a number of those misconceptions. Luckily, March was also International Women's Day, so have a phenomenal group of women panelists. We've got Abigail Agyei, we've got Olivia Kessel, and Chiko Bwalya. So I think we'll kick off with perhaps introductions. Olivia, how about with you? If you kick off, just introduce yourself, but about what you do and perhaps explain what neurodiversity is.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Dr. Olivia Kessel, and I might sound very American, but I was actually born in South Africa, then moved to England, and then moved to America, where this accent stuck. And I obtained my medical degree from the Royal College of Surgeons in Dublin, Ireland. And then I went back to South Africa, to Johannesburg, and I did my residency there during the rollout of antiretrovirals. And it was kind of a baptism by fire, because they started you with, see one, do one, teach one, which is great until they say, well, you're putting in a chest drain, and just seeing one, I felt like I needed a bit more practice. But anyway, it was a great experience. And my work background has included working in clinical medicine, both in hospitals and as a GP in Swaziland. I've also worked in some large biopharmaceutical companies such as AbbVie and Gilead Sciences, and I've run my own health consultancy firm as well called Evolve Care. For the past 6 years, I've also worked part-time for Ingeus, which provides different contracts for the DWP and NHS, including the Access to Work program, which is something we'll touch upon today in terms of how the DWP can help provide support within the workplace for neurodiverse individuals. But my real passion started about 2 years ago when I started my own podcast called the Send Parenting Podcast, which stands for Special Education and Neurodiversities. And it was inspired by my daughter, Alexandra, who is neurodiverse. And it's been a real great way to help other parents navigate neurodiversity by having experts on the show to share their knowledge and their experience. I'm also in the process of writing a book right now called ADHD Unmasked. I finished it, and I'm looking to publish it. It's in the publisher's hands as we speak. So I guess you can guess from my background, I haven't traveled a normal work trajectory. I've had a lot of different things. I guess it's due to partially my neurospicy nature, but I've enjoyed every step of the journey. And I'm looking forward to speaking to everyone today about how, we can make the workplace a place that's welcoming for neurodiverse individuals. So thank you, Ben.
Thank you. Abigail, do you want to share a bit about yourself and perhaps why neurodiversity is important to you? Oh, I think we'll need to get you unmuted.
Oh, yeah, maybe I should stay off mute. I think it did the same that it did to you, Dr. Olivia. I was saying it wouldn't let me unmute, so maybe I'll keep it off just to be on the safe side. But hi, thank you for having me here, Ben. And I'm so happy to be here with these amazing panelists. My name is Abigail Agyei Jones. I've worked predominantly as a civil servant for about 9 years, mostly in policy and strategy, mostly working with underrepresented groups, so in community engagement, equity and inclusion. And then for the last few months, I've now been working as a portfolio manager, looking at health inequity throughout London for an organisation called Impact on Urban Health. Along with that, I'm also a neuro-inclusion advocate, so really passionate about bringing more awareness around neurodiversity. I often do a lot of my focus on that kind of intersectionality aspect, so really thinking about people from different backgrounds, experiences with ADHD, especially Black women who tend to be underdiagnosed and misdiagnosed when it comes to ADHD. I also did a TEDx the year before last on ADHD in Black women. So yeah, I'm really happy to be here, be part of this conversation. I got my ADHD and dyspraxia diagnosis later on in life. So I'm always happy to kind of have these conversations and speak to people and students about kind of navigating being neurodivergent in the workplace and as students. So yeah, really happy to be here.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Chiko, over to you.
Hi, thank you so much. So I'm Chiko Bwalya. I'm the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Manager at CIPFA, and I have predominantly worked in the public sector and the not-for-profit sector as well. I think my investment around neurodiversity kind of started when I worked as the Vice President of Education for a student union. So I had the opportunity to work with students, both undergrad and postgrad, kind of looking at their experiences, navigating through education, and also dealing with the fact that there were so many limited resources around support, kind of looking at neurodiversity, especially with diagnosis as well. That was a really difficult time in higher education. It was also incredibly costly too. So I think that gave me an opportunity to work with organizations both in higher education, but also externally, to kind of see how we can improve the resources that we provide for students. And then that also kind of transpired in my career moving forward in other sectors, such as the violence against women and girls sector, looking at how we support service users, as well as the people that provide the support for service users, looking at the different struggles that they experience and kind of the areas that we're falling short in terms of providing them with support. So the way that we communicate with them, the way that we work with them, and also the way that we encourage them to work with us. So I feel like I've been able to kind of translate my experience of working with people with different abilities in the different sectors that I've kind of passed through. And now I'm sitting in the public finance sector, and I'm hoping that I'm able to translate that experience in this environment as well. So thank you so much for having me, and lovely to meet you all.
Lovely to meet you again. So Abigail, if we return to you, burnout's something that both neurodiverse, neurotypical individuals can struggle with from time to time. What sort of advice would you give to anyone struggling with burnout?
I think burnout is definitely something that's not easy, and it's something that can wreak its way in every stage of life. And I think especially when you're neurodivergent, I think you're more prone to experience burnout, because we're often, in a lot of ways, exerting ourselves a lot more to kind of do things. I know I can relate to that sometimes, how much I feel like I'm exerting myself. So I feel like at first it's important to acknowledge that burnout. So don't feel like that means you're lazy or you're weak. Recognizing it as early as possible is often helpful to the key to recovery. So I think watch out for those signs where you're starting to feel really tired, that brain fog, those kind of things. And I think it's important to kind of reframe it and not kind of feel like you're failing, but just feel like my energy reserves are depleting, really kind of noticing am I at my kind of high of my energy, am I at my low. I think it's really important to prioritize rest and not just kind of sleep, but really thinking about different types of rest. So do I need kind of a break? I've been definitely having that this week. It's been a really busy week with it being Neurodiversity Celebration Week. Of, if you need 10 minutes before a meeting, do I need to just kind of walk away from my desk? Do I need to reduce the noise, bright lights? What might be overstimulating me and like kind of creating more of that burnout? So I think that's important. And then kind of really thinking about where you can simplify things. So if you have to simplify things on that to-do list, do that. I think people who are neurodivergent, we tend to be kind of people pleasers and be more likely to overcommit. So not being afraid to kind of really think about where are those boundaries, what I can say no to, where I can create buffer times if it's in between meetings or tasks, where can I kind of, if you're feeling overcommitted, where can I say, I know I've been experiencing that this week. This is my focus time. I can't have meetings here. So I think it's like, really thinking about what can you put in place to minimize things, and thinking about what is happening, and where can I kind of reframe things and work out what works for me. What's my working preference style? What are the communication styles and things that will help me in reducing the burnout?
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Chiko, how do you essentially approach stress? Obviously, with your busy schedule, high pressure environment, essentially, how do you kind of approach stress and kind of a balanced lifestyle?
I think one thing that I have struggled with in the past, especially with being a young professional, is trying to remove the guilt of kind of feeling that and needing the time to separate yourself from your work. There can be an overwhelming amount of pressure to kind of to stay online, to stay available, and making sure that you are presenting yourself in a way that shows that you are an upbeat working professional. But I think, similar to what Abigail was saying, being able to kind of shut it down and say, do you know what, I need this time, I need an opportunity to kind of separate the work version of myself from the personal version of myself so that person can thrive, is incredibly important. So for me personally, I really feel like there's the value of hobbies and the value of taking like time for self-care has kind of been moved away because we're going into a bit of a hustle culture, which I feel like is a bit of a trigger word, but like people no longer want to have hobbies because they feel like they need to be able to profit from them. But it's incredibly difficult if you've already got your day job and you've got things that you need to do in order to make sure that you can thrive and you can progress in your career. But then the things that you used to find enjoyment in are no longer for enjoyment, they're also for survival. It's so hard to kind of separate those versions of yourself. So I really try to make sure that I'm able to maintain that at-home side of me where I can actually relax and I can find time to switch off of the things that I do enjoy that are in my personal life. And then I can also have the version of myself that I'm able to kind of cross over with that the person that I present at work and also kind of like my personal attributes too. And I think that's really important, being able to kind of have those different sections. I think it's really important to present your authentic self at work, but I also think it's really important to not lose that as well. So I like to be able to find time to do things that I enjoy. I've recently learned how to play the guitar, which I think is so valuable. But if someone told me that I needed to learn for money, no, absolutely not. I'm switching it off. So I feel like it's really important to be able to kind of put those elements of you in a box, but not close it off to the world as if it's something that you need to restrict. It's just it's safe and it's important for you to be able to say, this is for me, not for profit, not for work, and then this is my work version of self, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.
Can I piggyback off that quickly? Because I totally agree. I think we are living in a reality now where everything is felt like it has to be a side hustle. And it's like, no, that can just be for me. And something a friend said to me the other day was like, what have you done for you today, just for you? And I think that is something like you really have to prioritize some of those joys and those tiny things that are just hobbies for you. I think that can really help with reducing burnout as well. So I totally agree.
Yeah, I think I'm definitely in the space where I'm starting to think what are the things that I actually definitely like and doing more of that. So it's just, the kind of talking about, feeling guilt-free, essentially. It's like, this is what I want to do. So how do I make it happen? How do I do that? How do I take care of me, essentially? Olivia, what do you think? How does that kind of tie into self-advocacy, essentially?
Well, I think, it's really interesting. And as I'm the dinosaur in the room here with my age and having children and stuff. And what we're talking about right now is so important to lay that foundation, because then when you get kids and partners and those, we fall to the end of the list, especially as women, not to exclude the men, but it tends to be women. So we really do have to advocate for ourselves not just from a self-care perspective and for being able to fill our cup back up so we can give to other people. But we also, if we're neurodiverse, you have to advocate for yourself. And I mean, I even, from when you're a child, you have to start this in schools. And we as parents do it for our kids now, but teaching them the skills to say, my daughter now, she was diagnosed with ADHD at 11, which was late. And as a doctor, I should have recognized it. But as you were saying, you don't recognize it so much in females, and it's not the hyperactive little boy. So I completely missed it. And she tells me, Mom, I can't follow a list of instructions. You need to put it out step by step. So she's learning just to advocate now in the home. And the more we learn about it, then she can do that at school too. And we also need to do that at work too, because if we can't communicate what our strengths are and where we can soar, and also feel comfortable to express what our struggles are and what's really difficult for us, then we can't succeed in the workforce. And then it goes down the pathway of anxiety and burnout and leaving the job. So I think being your own advocate is so important. And the younger we can do it, the better, both from a personal perspective, but also from a career perspective.
That's right. Yeah. Right. And I think there are differences in how neurodiversity can show up in younger people versus young or older adults, essentially, isn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's really interesting because a lot of parents actually who are trying to find support for their children as they're going through the process of getting their children diagnosed, which is a long process, I might add, they're like, oh my gosh, that's me. And they get diagnosed later on. And also as hormonal shifts, also when you're older, you can, be diagnosed in your menopause kind of years as well. But often realization comes through their children and then they get diagnosed as well. And in the US, actually, when they test children, they test the parents too, because it's a highly inheritable genetic, the rates are like 80 to 90%, depending on what neurodiversity you're talking about. So the likelihood is you're probably neurodiverse too. So, yeah.
Really interesting. Abigail, how would you, so when you received your official diagnosis for ADHD, and I think you said dyspraxia, wasn't it? How would you say that affected you personally and possibly even professionally?
I think it's really interesting because I always say that getting that kind of official diagnosis, it was such an array of emotions. I feel like on one hand, I felt kind of liberated and validated in my thoughts because I kind of felt like, okay, there is something. So I always just thought, I'm not trying, I'm not pushing myself hard enough. Why do things seem harder? So on one hand, it was kind of like it gave me answers, but I feel like there was initial kind of feelings of kind of frustration and why had things taken so long. But I think in terms of how it's influenced my kind of career and personal life, like long term, I think it has helped me be more self-compassionate and kinder to myself, because I feel like when you kind of have that diagnosis, I think like there's kind of an understanding of yourself more. And I think it's also influenced, I think a lot of the time we focus so much, or the society and the world can teach you to kind of focus on your weaknesses, but I feel like there is so many of my strengths that come from being neurodivergent. I think in terms of problem solving, in terms of how I kind of engage with people, I think part of the reasons why kind of the common thread in my career has been about engaging with marginalized and underrepresented communities is because I kind of see myself in those communities. I am part of those communities. I think it's made me kind of really care about communities and want to kind of engage with systems and change things. It's made me more creative. And I think it's also kind of helped me navigate the workplace and understand that in some ways, although it's not designed for me, it's kind of helped me find ways to want to improve things in systems and workplaces. I think, yeah, it's really taught me in many ways. I think my neurodiversity and being neurodivergent has kind of helped me in many ways like that.
That's really interesting. So yeah, so essentially strengthened you to kind of recognize what you need.
Yeah, and there's definitely still some of those struggles, but I feel like it's, especially since getting the diagnosis, I've tried to kind of reframe things and understand that, okay, this is just the way I do things. I need to kind of work with my brain and not against it, and not, doesn't mean I don't have days where I feel like, oh, why do I have to lose focus, or why am I losing? I lost my keys this week. Those things are still there, but kind of I really try and still reframe and try and, yeah, just be kinder to myself where I can be.
I like that, reframing and being kind to yourself. That's really important. Olivia, is there anything you want to add to getting diagnosis or getting diagnosed and the importance of that?
Yeah, I think it's really challenging to get diagnosed now because waiting lists are really long. And so, it's, if you suspect, if you think you are, put yourself on the list. If you want to take yourself off later, you can. If you can go privately, that's a great option. If you have the money to do it, make sure you check that they're, a reputable individual, what their process is, get referrals, and recommendations from people, because you want to make sure that you get a thorough diagnosis. And, if you're an adult getting a diagnosis, you're going to need to get collaboration from someone in your family that can talk about how, you were as a child, and, so those type of things. But it can be, as Abigail mentioned, it can be incredibly life affirming because it can explain a lot, and it can also free you up to be like, okay, this is why I've been struggling. It's just the way my brain works, and 1 in 7 of us are neurodiverse. So, that's Cambridge University statistics. So it's actually quite normal. It's not abnormal,
Thank you. So shifting the dial slightly, closer to us, to performance and performance essentially within the workplace. Are there any insights that you can share from your work as a medical director in supporting neurodiverse people?
Yeah, I think the biggest kept secret around is access to work program. I think a lot of people don't know about it, and it's a scheme that's run by the government that basically supports all people with disabilities, including neurodivergent individuals, to get support in the workplace. And that can include an array of different support systems. So it could be a coach to help you manage with your executive function skills. It can be technology that helps, like if you're dyslexic and you need help with reading or text dictation. If you need sensory earphones, it can help to fund practical elements at work, but it can also help fund support. So, for example, my daughter's solicitor, who helped us to get her EHCP, or educational healthcare plan, at school, he had severe dyslexia, and he has a private individual who's a personal assistant funded by Access to Work, who comes to work and reads all of his emails and responds to all of his emails, because that's really challenging for him. He's got a great mind, and he's a great solicitor, and he got my daughter into a great specialist independent school, but he needed that bridge for something that was difficult for him. So I would highly recommend everyone to go to, if you know they're struggling and they need that extra support, you can self-refer, or an employer can refer you. It's on the gov.uk site, and you can get that support that you need to kind of bridge that gap for things that are really challenging, and make you not, again, go into burnout and end up having to leave your job because you're not getting the support you need.
I think that's great. Yeah, so we're not.
Can I piggyback off that as well? Sorry, everyone's saying such great things. It makes me keep on remembering things. Back on what Olivia was, Dr. Olivia was saying, that she's right on that. It's really, and you don't need an official diagnosis. If you think you just need further support, you can go through it. And I think, because I'm currently going through it again, because if you're a civil servant, you don't have access to it, because I was previously civil service. I don't know if it's because DWP is under is a government body, and civil service, I guess, has its own support that it puts in place. So I couldn't get it, but now I'm going through the process. The wait time is about 30 weeks, but I would still suggest going through it. I think in some cases, if you kind of have an upcoming job, they might speed you through the process, but it is really helpful, whether you have a diagnosis or not. If you think that you need that support, and you think you may have kind of a disability under that kind of protected characteristics, they do kind of look into helping you. So I think, yeah, it's amazing.
And it's legal obligation. So you know what I mean? Like it's fantastic.
No, that is great. Access to work, yes, that's something we can all look into. And again, it comes back to self-advocacy and doing the work we need to support ourselves. Chiko, I haven't forgotten about you. Do you think, Olivia was talking about coaches essentially, so within access to work, that there's some support that they provide around coaches even. What place do you think mentorship programs have in supporting neurodiverse employees in the workplace?
I think one of the basic points from mentorship, in my opinion, is having a goal to strive to. I think mentors are incredibly integral when kind of giving mentees an area to aspire to. You can see that someone is able to kind of thrive if they're a career mentor, for example, you see that someone's able to thrive in a similar field that you want to go into, and they might have experienced similar challenges to you as well. But you need clear-cut examples as to how they have been able to kind of succeed in that area. If you haven't had examples from your own personal experience, being able to see someone that has potentially progressed in leadership or progressed in moving from job to job successfully, and you need to kind of hear that they've experienced similar things to you, I think that's so important. And that can be in any aspect of work, but particularly if you have accessibility needs, but you're unable to articulate them because you haven't been given the words to kind of define what your experiences are. But seeing someone that has been through that and has been able to move through it successfully is so integral to being able to succeed, but also not mentally limit yourself as well. I think it's so I think everybody's kind of vulnerable to imposter syndrome and kind of doubting your abilities and the skills that you have and that you bring to the table. But being able to have a clear example of a coach or of a mentor to kind of see this is what they've done, this is what they've experienced, and this is how they've been able to kind of move through adversity, it's so important. But it can be a bit overlooked because not all organizations might see an importance in having a coach or in having a mentor, but being able to seek them out in your own time can also be something that is so valuable to your professional experience and also your personal experience as well. Because obviously we're not talking about just neurodiversity in the workplace. It does seep into every other aspect of your life. It could be in your personal life. It could be the time when you're in between jobs looking for new opportunities and being able to articulate what your experiences are and your needs. And coaches and mentors can be so integral in all those aspects in your experience.
Thank you. Really great answer. Olivia, do you think there are any misconceptions? I'm sure I know the answer to this first part at least. Misconceptions that exist about neurodivergent employees, and how might we address them?
Yeah, you know, I have to trim down my list, but I'll give you my top three, shall I? So first of all, like the one that, a neurodivergent employee is less productive than a neurotypical employee, okay? And, you know, that is just absolutely not true. The research has shown that actually, if you have a team that's made up of neurodiverse and neurotypical people, that neurodiversity brings an increase in productivity of up to 30%. So that is not true. So I think that's one myth that we can just throw out of the door and then chuck it. And then the second one is, oh, well, it's a really unfair advantage that we give adjustments to people who are neurodiverse. And they're getting the easy road. Excuse me, no. I mean, you wouldn't say to someone, you really shouldn't wear those glasses. It gives you an unfair advantage to see the same way that I can see without glasses. Would you ever say that? No. So why do we think that with neurodiversity that's why we should really be removing barriers? It's not a privilege. And the third one is kind of this viewpoint that, oh, neurodiverse people should go into the theaters and into creative arts. Yes, that's true. There are a lot of creative neurodiverse people, but that is so limiting. Neurodiverse people are great in finance, in law, in, as doctors, in all of those careers, and each of those careers benefit from having that variation. So that would be my third myth or misconception. I could go on, but I don't want to. Those are my top three.
Thank you. Chiko, what do you think public sector organizations can do to foster more neuro-inclusive environments?
I think there needs to be a cultural shift, 100%. There needs to be that moving away from the taboo that these aren't things that you're supposed to say, or these aren't things you're supposed to talk about. I think everybody should feel comfortable with talking about the way that their brain works. And I think what I love about neurodiversity is the fact that it's just the clear-cut a way to say that not everybody looks and acts and feels and thinks the same. And I feel like there are elements of like organizations in public sector that are so traditional, I might say. I want to say old school, but kind of traditional and set in their ways, and the fact that there are things you don't really speak about. You're not allowed to say it. You kind of struggle through that process and you hope that no one kind of catches you out and you hope that it works. But I think there are so many resources that we have available in the different organizations that sit amongst the public sector that we can not only utilize but share as best practice. We can also influence policy and change in the government, influence policy amongst different organizations that are that work in concurrence with us as well. I think that we have such a great opportunity to not only share best practice but share examples of successes that we have in our different organizations. But we need to move away from that fear and that taboo of neurodiversity being something different and obscure. I don't think that it needs to be viewed as that at all. In a really cliche way, it's kind of a superpower. You're able to kind of acknowledge the fact that different people and different employees behave and think differently, but the value that they bring to your organization will never take away from the successes and the growth. And I think that's something that the public sector kind of needs to shift out of that mentality and kind of move into this new way of thinking, the fact that it's going to do nothing but help rather than hinder the progress of your organization, of business. And I know that can be a bit difficult, but I think between a cultural shift and sharing of best practice, there kind of needs to be a bit of an open door policy. There might be some things that one organization don't do and they're not really progressive with that. Another organization is completely well versed in, but they're in such close quarters. However, they don't kind of share that. And I think that's really, really important for us to be able to progress and move forward. There's no need to reinvent the wheel when somebody else has already found a perfect way to kind of address some of the barriers that other organizations might be facing.
Absolutely. And what would you say colleagues or peers in the workplace can do to kind of encourage a bit more neuro-inclusivity?
I'm a big advocate for allyship. I think obviously, like, given like my work as well, it makes total sense. I think no one that is kind of experiencing a barrier should be the only person to advocate for that barrier to be removed. I think everybody kind of has a role and responsibility in that. Something that I would say from like an employer perspective is making sure that every part of the journey is kind of honed in on inclusivity, from the applications, from the job adverts that you put out, from the applications that you read and that you scrutinize, from that kind of sifting process to the people that you invite in. I think it's really important to ask the questions: are we, is our work accessible? Is our organization accessible? Do we ask the right questions, and do we give them an opportunity to ask us questions too? Which I think is so important. And sometimes we don't take pause with that. So kind of, I think we're so used to a certain way of practicing work that we don't actually stop and think. Maybe if someone that doesn't think the way I do would look at this and be like, oh, this is a bit challenging, we're just like, it's free for all, it's accessible for everyone. And I think that in itself kind of defines the difference between equality and equity. And I think when it comes to making sure that us as, like, for example, us as an employer are accessible, that whole journey, and recognizing the fact that we've got to ask these questions, and we've also got to ask the people that we're employing if our working structure, if our environment works for them, and if it doesn't, doesn't, we have to be ready to accept if the answer is no, what can we do to change that? Because you can't just ask passively and be like, oh, what do you need? Oh, we don't have the resources for that, but we do. Nice to know. You can't. You have to be ready to be like, this is how we're going to mitigate it. This is how we're going to support you. And that support also includes training as well. How do we train managers to ask these questions? How do we equip them with the tools that they need to then support their team members, their staff, their colleagues? How do we actually give them the tools that they need to understand the needs of their staff and then bring that back so that we can also impact and positively change our own culture as well? I think there are many tiers that we can hit and not miss the mark when it comes to kind of making sure that we have a positive influence on the people in our organizations and our colleagues and our peers.
I think there was a key bit you said there towards the end about leadership, and as people are stepping into managerial roles, training and awareness and of how they can support their employees, especially as we've got a lot of people in the core are students or early careers starting to step into positions where they're managing others. And sometimes from what I've seen, there can be that failing aspect where it's just, okay, here's a managerial role, here's a leadership role, but no leadership training has been provided or skills or anything around that. So yeah, that's something definitely we can do better in the public sector, I feel. So actual active support there. And Olivia, adding on to that, what would you say, organizations can do beyond compliance?
Yeah, I mean, I think Chiko brings up a really good, point there about the hiring process, because actually, before neurodiverse individuals can even get into the workplace, that kind of CV and interview process can be a complete barrier to some neurodiverse individuals. I mean, 85% of autistic people are unemployed. I mean, that is a huge statistic. So what can we do as organizations to change that? And actually, the research shows that the CV and interview current traditional way that we do it, it's not actually really effective at actually matching, productive workforce with that. So it doesn't actually work. It shouldn't be gold standard. So what can we do in terms of how we recruit people? Can we use AI? Can we use, inclusive technology that doesn't maybe have the biases that we might have in our organizations? Can we change the way we do the interviews? Can we do skill-based kind of trials? Can we, I know for a lot of neurodiverse people, can they have what the questions are, or what's going to be asked? Can they play an active role in it? There's lots of little things that don't cost money or resources that you can do, because we're actually, even before they get into the doors of being employed, we're blocking a lot of people who could be a really great contributing employee to our company. So I think, that's the first step. And then I think what Chiko said in terms of, creating that inclusive environment and making sure that you can actually do things is really important. And that we promote people, not just people who can be people managers, because not everyone can be a people manager, whether or not you have training or not. So we need to create different trajectories for people, and look at their skills and look at what they can give to the organization. That doesn't just mean they manage more and more people.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's key. I think there is a lot that I can say can be refined with the recruitment processes across a lot of companies. And across the years when I've applied for different jobs here and there's a lot of different processes, but some of them are just so extensive. You've got the I can't remember what you call it, but whereas you've got to fill in some sort of answer certain questions and scenario based and a lot of that. And how does that exclude certain groups? As you said, potentially providing questions beforehand to individuals, but there's a lot of things, as you said, free that organizations can do to refine their recruitment processes.
Sorry, there was one thing that Dr. Olivia said that reminded me. I think the way that we've kind of shifted, not to, but like that COVID period, going from interviews being in person to interviews being online, that really opened a pool of accessibility, moving outside of not just like that physical aspect, but also the way that people process information as well. There is I think the way we look at like 9 to 5s, for example, technically a 9 to 5 isn't a 9 to 5 for a lot of people. If you work in the office, it's a 7 to 7. And I think the same thing should be said for interviews as well. It's not just that 1 hour you're going to be in there. It's the preparation that you have to do before the interview. It's the traveling in as well. For that in itself can be such a barrier to a lot of people too. It's the sitting in front of a panel and not being sure if you can look down at your notes, if you can ask questions, if you can ask a person to repeat a question. I feel like that shift online might not be preferable to a lot of people, but giving that option to ask someone, would they prefer to sit in front of you face to face, or would they be able to thrive online? I think it's really important. And it might be small, but it's a really big and impactful detail for a lot of people.
No, I think, yeah, that's true. That option, having that option of different, yeah, accessibility is essentially that's what it comes under. And Abigail, what advice or strategies would you give to students who seek to progress in their career, but potentially feel neurodiversity is a barrier to them?
I'd say that it's important. I understand why often it can feel like a barrier, but it's really important to kind of reframe some of those challenges as strengths, not to minimize or take away from any of those challenges. They are there, but I think it's really about reframing, being advocating for your needs, and kind of building a career that works for you. That's something that's taken me a while to do, but really think about what works for me. So I think it's really important for neurodivergent people to recognize your strengths. I think we can often be our biggest critiques and really like criticize everything that we do, because we're often probably used to hearing a lot of those critiques. But I think it's really important to embrace so many of the unique abilities you may have, whether that's like being creative, that problem solving, deep focus, and like really leveraging those as assets, and instead of just kind of focusing on, for instance, sometimes I struggle with focus, like thinking of that, or I can't focus because I have ADHD. Reframe it and think I work best when I block out time for deep work. I need quiet workspace. I need noise cancelling headphones, and that will help me really be focused and really work efficiently. So really kind of reframing that, and really kind of identifying what your skills and traits are, what sets you apart and will help you in your career, and what kind of value you bring somewhere. So I think it's really important to think about that when you are thinking about those future careers, like kind of finding the right work environment for you. And that can often be easier said than done, because you're going into somewhere and places may make promises, but I think it's really important to kind of read through policies where you can, see which ones are neurodivergent, find out the disability confidence scheme is something that a lot of organizations are now following now. So see if the organization you're applying for or looking into, are they do they have that kind of disability confidence? Are they kind of committed into wanting to prove the systems? And really try and, I'd say, advocate for yourself as early as possible. If you need adjustments, don't be afraid to ask, and just be clear about what those instructions are. You don't necessarily have to disclose if you're not comfortable about disclosing what kind of diagnosis or help you need, but just kind of really frame it around, I work best with written instructions, I need structured deadlines, I've just moved into a new role, and I've kind of really set that out for my manager in an email, and he's like, oh, I really appreciate this, I wish people would kind of let me know from the get-go what they need. So I think it's just about really kind of being clear about what you need, and try and find, if you can, maybe mentors, role models who might share similar experiences. If you're going into organizations or kind of in a university where there are kind of networks, there are so many now disability networks, neurodivergent people are creating neurodivergent networks. So kind of where you can find that space and that support, I think is really helpful as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Right, we're getting close to, so in a moment we're going to have well, yeah, I suppose if everyone gets ready, we're going to go into a Q&A session in a moment, and then we'll have it where I can see there's been a bit of activity in the chat, which is great to see. But yeah, so if people can put their questions into the chat, then we'll get through as many of them as possible. Whilst people are preparing their questions, Abigail, there was something I wanted to ask. It came to my mind, and now it's gone. Oh dear. Anyway, so we'll wait for the first question. It will come back to me. It happens from time to time where things in one moment and it's gone the next.
You're balancing a lot right now, so that is fine. You can come back to me. I'll still be here.
Thank you. What would you say is the future of neurodiversity in the workplace? What's the ideal look for you, essentially? What does that look like? Let's say in the next 5 years time.
Or what do I want to kind of see? I want to see.
So future of neurodiversity in the workplace in terms of it being an inclusive environment. What would that look like to you? What would you want to see? What would need to change?
What needs to change? I think we need a real kind of understanding of that being neurodivergent is not a monolith. So really taking the time to make sure we're kind of understanding people's different experiences, really creating environments where people can feel free to share the support they need, really thinking about that kind of, how can we support people with different reasonable adjustments and understanding, as I think Dr. Olivia mentioned earlier on, that reasonable adjustments is not like, it's about leveling the playing field. It's not special treatment. It's about supporting people with their needs. I think there needs to be that training, I think, is important. I think Chiko mentioned that earlier. I think we need to create environments where everyone is kind of getting that further training, that intersectionality. So we're really understanding how to create more neurodivergent friendly awareness training, looking at microaggressions, biases, really making sure that everybody, so the onus is not just on the people who are neurodivergent. It shouldn't really, obviously, it's important for people to feel like they can advocate for themselves, but if we're creating safe spaces where everyone kind of feels empowered and everyone wants to make that change and be an ally, as Chiko mentioned earlier on, we can improve that. So I think that's what I want to see, where we're creating systems and environments where everyone is thinking about how can we make, because I always say when we create new inclusive environments, that creates inclusive environments for everyone. So if we're really thinking about how can we support people on really taking the time to understand everybody's kind of reasonable adjustments. And I have a form that I'm happy to share that when I've managed teams, I share about kind of what works for me, how I like to work, how I like to communicate, and I ask them to fill it in so we can all share with each other. So I think it's about really creating environments where we can all share the different ways we like to work and communicate, and also getting that training to understand the different ways people work, and thinking long term, as I think was mentioned earlier on, about that kind of recruitment and hiring as well. Are we thinking about the different ways? Are we just thinking about kind of societal norms of what people say? So if somebody's not making eye contact, or if somebody has a different way of communicating, think about, is that those specific things needed for this role? If they're not a receptionist, or if they're doing something else, and they might kind of communicate in a different way, or they might make eye contact in a different way, don't go to associating and thinking that's rude or something, but kind of understanding different styles and the way people communicate. So yeah, there's some of the things I'm hoping for in the future.
Right, thank you. So we've had a question come through, and audience, I'll say, yeah, feel free to come off mic if that's easy for you, and if you want to ask a question that way. But we've had a question from Helen. What resources would you recommend for a neurodiverse person who is looking for a job? Olivia, perhaps you want to tackle this one? And then...
I would say access to work is a really great first step to start thinking about. But I guess that's maybe when you've got the job more, and then also to look at as Abigail was saying, like, what kind of company are you going into? What are their policies and procedures? How do they accommodate people? But I wouldn't close yourself off to any organization, because really there is a legal right that everyone should be able to work everywhere. But I think one of the key things for me is, where would you flourish? You know what I mean? Like, I know for myself, I'm not good at attention to detail. I hate it. I'm big thinker, lots of energy. That's the kind of role I want to get into, So know yourself, check in with yourself as to what type of role and what type of organization fits you as well. But no organization should be not accessible to you, but you might have to fight more for it. So it depends what path and road, if you're a rebel or if you want an easier road. But I know that's kind of, I'm standing on the fence here, but I think that there should be no doors that are closed to you, but I also think you need to play to your strengths and where you're going to be happy as well. So I think you need to balance those two things.
Thank you. Abigail, Chiko, is there anything you want to
add? Chiko, did you want to go?
I was just going to mention there are resources that are typically geared to employers, but they also do have information for people that are looking for jobs as well. For example, like Inclusive Employers and ACAS, they have examples to how employers and employees can kind of navigate and thrive in those spaces, considering the differing needs that they may have, and they can be quite useful as well. So I think I definitely agree with Dr. Olivia. Don't box yourself into thinking that you need to go to a certain type of space, but also see how that work environment will work for you and will benefit you. I think when we're looking at at employment and recruitment, we have to understand that it is an equal exchange. There are needs from both sides. They need you to be able to do this job and to fulfill this role, but you also need them, because you want to be part of that workplace as well. But if it doesn't benefit you, then don't try to kind of mold yourself and put yourself in a box and try and make it work, because in the long term you won't thrive. So I think there are a few resources that are typically geared to employers, but they have a wealth of information for people that are looking for roles in those spaces as well. So Inclusive Employers, and I think ACAS is quite useful too.
Thank you.
I'd say a few in terms of ADHD UK has a welfare pack I'll put the link in there, that's really helpful. They help neurodivergent employees and employers, so employees and employers navigate reasonable adjustments. So I think that can apply to all neurodivergent people, where they kind of have some resources to help kind of start those conversations if you're kind of fearful of how to approach those conversations, and vice versa if an employer wants to help an employee. Do It has a lot of online, is it called Do It Center? I'll find the link and put it in the group. They have a lot of online resources as well. And then I'd say for yourself, a lot of productivity things that help me. I think AI is very good now. ChatGPT can be very helpful to kind of help with thoughts. I used to use Todoist, is it? That's kind of quite good for to-do lists. I used to use that quite a lot. Things like Notion are really good for planning, kind of structuring your thinking. So there's loads of things. It's like kind of mind mapping and read and write tools. So there's a lot of tools that can be good to kind of Grammarly to help with my grammar, because I'm still always working on that. So there's a lot of kind of tools you can use, and I'd say a lot of support groups out there as well. So I always praise wherever I go ADHD Babes. They're an amazing group for Black women and non-binary people with ADHD. ADHD UK, I think, has different support groups as well, but there's a lot of kind of support groups out there if you need other community and like-minded people to support you. And yeah, ADHD Babes, being in that community, I know has helped a lot of people kind of just navigate the diagnosis process. So often if you're on a lot of these community groups, there's people who've been through a lot of what you've been through and can help navigate kind of this journey as well.
Thank you. We've had another question come through from Miriam. How can managers identify neurodivergent individuals who have not received a diagnosis while still providing support? For example, it's important to avoid the perception that the individual is unmotivated or lacks initiative. Chiko, I'll come to you with this one. The message in the chat if you guys want to see it, and then we'll go around.
I think if you're talking from the perspective of a manager, I think it's important to not single anyone out if you do have if you have concerns but you're not really sure who it's impacting. I think the best way would kind of be to take a blanketed approach and approach all of your team to say, if anybody has particular needs or if you need extra support, here are the resources that are available. If you're able to make them widely available, you don't know if someone actually is neurodiverse, or you don't know if they're moving towards getting a diagnosis and they're unsure of what would actually benefit them, but it could benefit every single person in your team. So I think that's probably the best approach, because like I said, you don't want to single anyone out, and you also don't want to make anyone feel as though they've done something wrong, because I don't think there's anything wrong with having a different way of working and kind of needing a different approach in management, but it can be a bit difficult if you're being looked at as, okay, this is a bit different to everyone else, I'm going to ask you. And if they haven't even had the thought of going through a diagnosis, if this isn't actually something that they recognize within themselves, it can then change your relationship between a team member and a manager. So I think taking a blanketed approach is important, because it also allows you to widen that pool of accessibility. So even if a specific tool or a specific resource that's available in your organization is typically geared towards neurodiverse people, it could be beneficial for everyone. And I think that kind of does encompass the thought around inclusivity. I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, that is. Thank you. Olivia.
I agree with that as well, in terms of I was going to say, yeah, I do agree with that you want to create environments where, and that's why when I've kind of managed people, I always kind of create it around, because you're hoping that as a manager, you're regularly meeting with your staff, you're regularly kind of checking in. So that's when you can kind of frame the conversation around how things going, kind of, this is what I noticed, this is where your strengths are, is there any more support you need? And then kind of frame it around that. So really understanding, oh, is there kind of further support you need? Is how do you like to receive feedback? Is there further ways to like really kind of framing conversations around kind of what some of those strengths are, and then trying to find out what further development or support people need? Because generally we want to create, of course we want to support neurodivergent people, but you want to support all people in the workplace to have inclusive working environments. I think it's important to kind of get that understanding, and then where you can bring all those resources to a wider team if needed, then that's really good.
It's interesting because there's a book called that Neurodivergent People are the Canary in the Mines for Education. And I would say the same applies for employers as well. You know, neurodivergent individuals are the canaries in the mines that are saying, hey, everyone has to follow this and be this way kind of model doesn't work anymore. And actually, what's good for neurodivergent employees is good for all employees, and should become best practice. So, you know, I think neurodivergent people are leading the charge, but it's something that can benefit everybody, you know, because it's all a spectrum, right? Where it's all part of human variation. So it's not just people that are diagnosed. I think that's really key and really important.
Very true, very true. Because I feel like, yeah, there's sometimes a worry that sometimes exists where people might feel they don't meet the threshold to be diagnosed officially, but there's still traits that they have where it's like, well, what support can I engage with? Where do I get that support essentially? But yeah, the support that we provide, or that we've been talking about today, it actually supports everybody, and it can. We've got another question come through from Sarah. So Sarah's really keen for their organization's plan for a new monthly directorate-wide in office days, so everyone coming into the office. How can they approach approximately 70 people? Oh, it's just mute 2 seconds. How can they approach approximately 70 people to not wear perfume and to turn off their notifications, etc.? Or should they leave this one to their manager, line manager? Let's go for Olivia. Do you want to tackle this one?
Yeah, this is, I mean, you know, I think I think it's about education again, and I think that, you know, it's not the responsibility of Sarah to be able to solve these issues, and I think it is a big, wider issue that now, you know, everyone's trying to make everyone come back into the workplace again, and that can be really challenging. We've had a discussion about that already in terms of the interview process, but it can also be challenging for individuals who, you know, having an open work plan just doesn't work. I'm one of them. I can't concentrate. I cannot. My attention goes everywhere but what I'm supposed to do. So, you know, but it's not something that you as an individual, I think, employee can change. You need to make sure that you know, work together with your manager, with the company, to kind of see how you can navigate this to make it inclusive for all. And yeah, it's going to be an interesting time, I think, because, you know, the flexibility that's needed in the workforce with also inflexibility, it needs to be a place where everyone can flourish, and being flexible is going to be important towards that.
Definitely. And I think, yeah, so even Sarah would add to that. So yeah, bringing it up with your line manager in the first and foremost, and then they can essentially take it up the chain where it's trying to make accommodations, or perhaps whether it's newsletters that go out, or it suddenly becomes a bit of best practice that people are aware of people's sensibilities. And then that can be kind of best practice essentially. But definitely by speaking up in the first instance, I think that will be the first step, really. Abigail, is there anything you want to add to that, maybe with your experiences of being in the office?
I'd just say, yeah, try and frame it as kind of positively as possible. So kind of focus around it not feeling necessarily like kind of a rule, but like a request that it'd be great to kind of get together as often as we can, understand the different hybrid ways that people like to work, and maybe especially around, I presume, some of those things like the perfume thing is the sensitivities, maybe just kind of framing it around some colleagues have sensitivities to strong scents, so if we can maybe avoid strong perfumes, maybe just kind of getting kind of an understanding and really kind of, yeah, explaining to people the benefits of sometimes coming together, but also understanding the different ways that people work, that people might not always be able to come in. But if there's kind of just that understanding that it's about bringing the team together, maybe, yeah, so framing it in a positive way. And then I think maybe speaking to your manager, and it should be leadership who maybe sends that message out, but having those conversations with those senior leaders and thinking about the different ways for people to feel included and not feel like they're being excluded or feeling forced to do something.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you very much. Right, okay, so we've got about 5 minutes left. So I think that essentially brings us to the end of our chat. I hope everyone's found it quite useful. I'll give a bit of a summary just in terms of some tools that we've got available. So a lot of, so Chiko, Olivia, Abigail, they've shared a lot of different tools and resources that are out there and that you can have access to. And within CIPFA, we've also got, this term we'll be releasing a learner needs profiler, which will essentially help students to, well, it will provide a report, and it will help students when it comes to designing their sort of best approach to studying. So that will be coming out this term, and there'll be information around it, so you can look into that. I think you can fill out a bit of a survey or form, and it will kind of produce a report for you. We also have our Wellbeing Hub with a number of resources on there, videos, documents, interactive discussions, which you can use for personal guidance, or if you just want to understand a topic better. And then, of course, we've got a number of events that are coming up down the line, so keep an eye out by the usual platforms, LinkedIn, WhatsApp, student newsletter, etc. Especially we've got PF Live coming up in June, so keep a lookout for that. But huge thank you to Dr. Olivia, Abigail, and Chiko. You guys have been amazing, and it's been a really useful conversation. And thank you to the audience as well for participating, enjoying. I hope, yeah, there's something that you've been able to take away from today's conversation.